Intruder!
How did he get in? In through the window? Bye-bye.
Welcome to part 2 of my Doctor Who DVD collection overview, where we shall be looking back at the Russell T Davies era of the show, where in part 1 we looked at Christopher Eccleston in Series 1, and David Tennant taking on the role of the Doctor in Series 2, where in this video we shall be continuing to explore his adventures with Series 3, Series 4, and the 4 specials, which ultimately concluded the 10th Doctor's era of the show, but as we all know, that is certainly not the end for David Tennant, who is coming back for a couple of specials, with Russell T Davies also coming back as showrunner of Doctor Who. And so without any further delay, let's continue looking through the legacy of the Davies era, continuing with Series 3.
Removing the emotions makes you stronger. That's what your creator thought all those years ago.
He was wrong.
He was what?
Following in the footsteps of magnificent storytelling from Series 2, we have the slightly more edgy, darker, more menacing Series 3, which honestly was my favourite for a very long time. I love a lot of the episodes featured throughout, and I particularly love having John Sim as arguably the main antagonist for this run, as the Master, bringing that iconic character back for New Who. And this box set is honestly great in terms of the overall design. There is a slightly better variation of this. This is the standard version, but there was a limited edition variation which had a slipcover of the Master, which was lenticular, which I would love to try and grab one day. I remember that being quite rare, but perhaps it's not as rare nowadays. But this is the box set anyway, with David Tennant as the 10th Doctor and John Sim there as the Master. There's the spine. The back cover featuring Ten and, of course, Freema Agyeman as Martha Jones, a wonderful companion featured throughout the majority of this run of episodes. And then just like with the second series box set, we have 2 miniature box sets inside, with this being yet another 6-disc set. There is the episode guide, and then we have discs 1 through to 3. And then in the other digipack, we have discs 4, 5, and 6. Some excellent background artwork in this one as well, with, again, the Master prominently pictured. Just as before, let us go through this run of episodes, of which there are some personal favourites included on here, starting off with genuinely one of the funniest episodes of Doctor Who, and that is the Christmas special, The Runaway Bride. And the comedy angle from this is mainly down to the fun chemistry between Ten and Donna Noble, which this was the character's first episode, Catherine Tate, delivering a hilarious performance throughout, and Donna will always be my favourite companion, and this episode perfectly introduced her into the mad world of the Doctor, where Donna mysteriously teleports her way onto the TARDIS, giving the Doctor something new to investigate, especially after the events that occurred in the finale of Series 2. And so he's wondering what caused this to happen, which keeps him busy, of course, where their banter throughout is just great, where they uncover a world-threatening plot at the hands of a spider-like alien known as the Rachnos, which has such a great design, a very memorable episode with so much going on. Honestly, one of the best for this particular run. And as we get into the main run of episodes, starting off we have Smith and Jones, where the Doctor visits a hospital under the alias Mr. Smith, where he is formally introduced to Martha Jones, a practicing medical student. And when the entire hospital is teleported onto the moon, an alien police force known as the Judoon begin hunting for an alien amongst the humans. Bad news, obviously, for the Doctor, who is also an alien, where an alien in disguise is perfectly hidden by literally sucking the blood of other humans through a straw. Really creepy ideas throughout this one, some brilliant CGI as well, which in my opinion still holds up to this day, with this being an overall very fun introductory episode for Martha Jones, where the Doctor is able to find a suitable companion surprisingly very quickly to replace Rose, even though he is still very emotionally attached to the ideas behind Rose Tyler. With Martha now enthralled by the Doctor, and the Doctor equally wanting to kind of show off, he agrees to take her on a trip which takes us to the Shakespeare Code, where they travel to the 17th century, and this was an episode that I did not appreciate at all when I was younger, but on revisit, I found it to be very enjoyable. It adds a fictional kind of context to the lost William Shakespeare play, Love's Labour's Won, lost for a reason, where the Doctor discovers that witchcraft is responsible for sudden deaths, where the ending to this lost play is a method of casting a spell to end the world. And I thought that was such a great idea. It was very inventive, and using something that is actually a real life story and then building a fiction around that, I thought that was a genius idea. Gridlock is a throwback to the New Earth episode from Series 2 with the Doctor revisiting New York, where things have drastically changed since he was last here with Rose. Suddenly, Martha is kidnapped, allowing a couple access to the ominous motorway, where journeys can last for years, where a secret lies in the depths of the motorway itself. And this features some great characters, albeit some familiar ones as well. And with the Doctor searching individual cars to find Martha, there is a lot of tension throughout and so many great creative character designs. And particularly the acting from Tennant is very notable in this one, especially where by the end he finally opens up emotionally to Martha about his concealed past, which leads us to a very evocative scene in my opinion. Moving on now, we have Daleks in Manhattan and Evolution of the Daleks, which oddly is a controversial two-parter across the fan communities. I had absolutely no idea people disliked these episodes so much. Yes, they are cheesy, but the idea of the Daleks being transported back to the 1930s to then modify their DNA, I thought was phenomenal. In particular, the human-Dalek hybrid design when Dalek Sec becomes the first to evolve outside of the shell, as they say. It's a shame more wasn't done with this idea. They just ran with it a little bit longer, where the ending to the first part is such a gripping cliffhanger. I would have loved to have seen more of this, where perhaps an alliance between humanoid Daleks and the Doctor could have occurred, which would have been a game changer. Instead, the Daleks themselves betray the humanoid Sec, resulting in their destruction at the hands of a new race of Dalek-human hybrids, with a little bit of Time Lord spliced in there as well. Some fascinating ideas with a less enthralling ending, leaving a lot more to be desired, where Dalek Khan is the last remaining member of the Cult of Skaro. The Lazarus Experiment is one of my least favourite episodes, where the Doctor bears witness to an elderly scientist, Dr. Lazarus, who is able to cheat the aging process and revitalize himself. The only problem is that his DNA is constantly changing, where he can now mutate into this really weird scorpion-like creature, which removes the essence of life forms, and it's just a throwaway episode for me. I genuinely just did not care for this at all. I like how part of it ties into the finale, but otherwise, it just really was very uninspired in my honest opinion. 42 is another episode I really didn't think anything of at all. The Doctor and Martha are trapped on a ship heading straight for the sun, with only 42 minutes to save themselves and the crew. Oh, and the sun starts possessing people. Yeah, just really uninspired with themes we've seen before. Nothing really new brought to the table as such. There are some interesting set designs, but otherwise, really, in my opinion, one of the worst episodes. On a more positive note, we have one of my all-time favourite stories from New Who, and that is the two-parter Human Nature and the Family of Blood, which I believe was based on a novel which I would love to pick up at some point. And in this story, we have the Doctor forced to change his biology from Time Lord to fully human, hiding from the title villains at the Family of Blood. And set in 1913, he and Martha hide in a boarding school, assuming jobs where the Doctor learns what it's like to be human, where he falls in love with the school nurse under Martha's jealous eye, and their one-sided romance throughout becomes all the more fascinating, drawing even more attention. And I love the villains in this, the family in humanoid bodies with unusual powers trying to literally sniff out the Doctor. Particularly, I loved the actor that played Baines, with a great sort of confrontational ending with that character. And that last piece of dialogue where inevitably the family loses, where Baines says, "We wanted to live forever, so the Doctor made sure that we did," is one of the most spine-chilling moments, and arguably this two-parter is one of the best highlights of the entire Russell T Davies era. Blink is the highest-rated episode of the show, and for a reason. This is one of the most terrifying stories for its introduction of the Weeping Angels, who are supposedly as old as the universe, if not older, of which these are quantum-locked beings which only move when unobserved by others, in which case if you were to look at one of these, it would just remain a statue. And with the Doctor now separated from the TARDIS, a young lady called Sally Sparrow uncovers a conspiracy of messages sent from the Doctor with the hopes of sending the TARDIS back to him to stop the Angels from consuming its power. And there is so much mystery to this, so many great layers of storytelling where it uses unexpected ideas, whilst also preying on the idea of the unknown. And this comfortably leads us into the three-part finale with Utopia, The Sound of Drums, and Last of the Time Lords, where Captain Jack returns, joining the Doctor and Martha far into the future, where they uncover a 1,000-year project to save the human species. And this is led by Professor Yana, who has a lot more to him than meets the eye. Turns out it's actually the Master in disguise, where he regenerates from Derek Jacobi into John Sim, of which I wish we kind of had more time with the former actor, but seeing John Sim in this role, as many know, he is one of my favourite actors of all time, and this role is easily one of the best of his whole career. And setting the events in motion, the Master has surprisingly been present across the entirety of the Doctor's timeline all season. We just didn't realise it. And you can see small traces of him in the form of political campaigning for Harold Saxon, the alias he goes by when becoming Prime Minister. And with lustful ideas towards mayhem and world conquest, this is where he puts up the ultimate fight against the Doctor, just for the sake of causing trouble. He lies to the public about aliens making contact with peaceful intentions, only to then spawn chaos across the entire planet, and he uses this alien race that he basically invented, called the Toclophane, which are actually made out of the future humans. The only way that they can exist in this reality is thanks to the stolen TARDIS being used as a paradox machine. Overall, a pretty horrific concept. In terms of the story, however, it's not the best kind of conclusion. Amazingly, it's up to Martha to stop the Master, leading into the final part where the Doctor is now immobilized, with a great reference to the Lazarus episode where the Master has a laser screwdriver and uses it to age up the Doctor ridiculously to make him powerless. Martha travels the world spreading stories of the Doctor, where belief in the man saving the day is apparently enough to stop the Master and reverse the events that happened, making the year that never was. It's a hopeful idea, but comes off as the ultimate Deus Ex Machina, and particularly the main draw I get from this is tense conflict over the Master living, wanting him to regenerate when he is defeated, because they are the last of the Time Lords, but this time the Master chooses to die where the Doctor grieves once more for yet another painful loss. And this episode isn't all bad in my honest opinion, it's entertaining overall. There are some great points in particular, such as the Face of Bo reveal. I remember that being such a big deal, along with Martha, after the events that occurred, that they all remember but actually never happened, Martha choosing to move on to help the world herself. I thought that was a very interesting idea, particularly for moving someone on away from the Doctor, where the Doctor has so many infinite possibilities surrounding them, and Martha chooses to walk away and do the sensible thing for her. I thought that was a great way to end their adventures together, where the Doctor and Martha still remain very close friends, but they are no longer going to travel with one another so consistently.
I think your song must end soon.
Meaning?
Every song must end.
Next up we have the complete Series 4, which is the last complete run of episodes from Russell T Davies, and contains some of my favourite stories from the show, mainly because of the wonderful dynamic between the 10th Doctor and Donna Noble, who returns as the mainstay companion for this collection. And for this particular box set, we have a limited edition sleeve for this one, described as the Honeycomb Supreme Dalek cover, which I think was exclusive to HMV here in the UK, and that's literally the only major difference. I believe the standard has a cover with Davros on the front, if memory serves. And then we have the interior cover there with some of the companions featured throughout the final few episodes of this run. And here's a look at the contents for this box set, of which is basically the standard by this point. It's a 6-disc set with 2 digipacks included. There's the similar style of artwork with snapshots from the episodes included. And there we have discs 1, 2, and 3, along with the episode guide. And then discs 4, 5, and 6, of which I love how all the discs in this particular series box set have villains spread across every disc. I think that's a really fun touch. Going through the episodes for Series 4, we begin with yet another Christmas special, and that is Voyage of the Damned, of which I recall really disliking this episode when I first saw it, but on reflection, I was surprised at what aspects I genuinely did enjoy about it. I think the story is a little bit frustrating at times, but the characters are overall very refreshing, and for me, this is where parts of the show looked to be uncertain, especially with what direction the Doctor as a character was going to be going in, and how he was almost wanting to choose who to save and who deserved to be saved when a crisis occurred, and this episode definitely does test his patience in that respect. And in terms of companions, bizarrely, they brought in Kylie Minogue as a guest spot, and she fit right in. Obviously, she wasn't going to be a permanent companion, but she had a lot to offer playing a servant character aboard the Space Titanic, stuck doing a job she disliked only to meet the Doctor and become enchanted by similar dreams of wanting to travel. I love the idea of an Earth-like planet sending out a cruise ship in context to observe primitive worlds such as planet Earth itself, only for disaster to strike, and this is where the story gets very convoluted, where the captain sabotages the ship's destination where it travels for an asteroid field, and this is where the vessel is more or less destroyed as part of an insurance scam.
My name is Max.
For Disc 2, we have Partners in Crime, The Fires of Pompeii, and Planet of the Ood, which, bringing back Donna Noble in Partners in Crime, this is one of my favourite character-based episodes, where both Donna and the Doctor are investigating a conspiracy, only they don't realise they are both on the same case, and this makes for some brilliant comedically timed scenes, seeing both characters in the same place, and they somehow keep missing one another until they don't. And this scene where they can see one another yet again is easily one of the most memorable for the lip reading and the miming, all whilst the villain, Mrs. Foster, is watching. There are some great ideas. I love the concept of these aliens being grown from human fat, known as the adipose. Just absolutely adorable, and this was a great way to set up the story going forward for Donna Noble. The Fires of Pompeii is a very well-acted episode where the Doctor and Donna visit ancient Rome, literally before Volcano Day set before the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. And this is where they discover some people are claiming to predict future events, and some are even turning to stone. And there are some stunning practical effects in this one where the Doctor uncovers a plot where aliens are operating the volcano to transform the world into rock-like beings. And there's a great moral dilemma surfaced in this episode where Donna wants to warn and save everybody, but the Doctor refuses. This is a fixed point in time. Death is part of life, where eventually she convinces him to save at least one family. And this is where there's a really fun Easter egg written into the show later down the line, where Peter Capaldi played Caecilius in this story, whose family is saved. And there's a great connection to this plot point later on where Capaldi went on and actually played the character of the 12th Doctor, and so 12 actually gained some inspiration from this very story. Planet of the Ood is one of my favourites. I love the return of these aliens, with some excellent social commentary on slavery, a despicable portrayal of humanity taking advantage of the Ood species. And there's some harsh truths revealed as to how they are basically being lobotomized to serve. And when I was younger, I found aspects of this episode really disturbing, such as the brain being held by the hands of the Ood, only to then be removed and replaced by the sphere for communication. And it was a genius idea to continue the usage of this as a weapon. And I both love and hate the main villain being turned into an Ood. That sequence where he removes his human flesh, revealing the Ood beneath, was masterfully done with a mix of practical and CGI effects, but still nonetheless is very creepy. Disc 3 delivers with some of the most creative episodes of New Who, starting off with one of my favourite two-parters, the Sontaran Stratagem and the Poison Sky, which successfully reinvents a classic villain for New Who, and I feel this variation of the Sontaran is a huge improvement on the original creature design, still retaining some of the old lore but adding a lot more to it, with the Sontarans manipulating a child genius into poisoning planet Earth with a new car device that will supposedly remove all CO2 emissions. And their goal instead is to create a cloning planet, making millions more Sontaran soldiers. And there are some excellent dialogue points throughout this, some genuinely very funny moments, some a bit more intentional than others, shall we argue?
Latest firing stock. What do you think, Doctor? Are you my mummy? If you could concentrate.
And I also love how Martha Jones is brought back for this episode, which she plays a very crucial role throughout. And her chemistry with Donna Noble is surprisingly quite fun, considering an aspect of jealousy could have been brought up into the equation, but instead their friendship does blossom from this point onwards. The Doctor's daughter has some very unique themes relating to protesting war and how conflict can occur over something so minimal. And we have also, of course, the mystery character, the title character, the Doctor's daughter, a clone named Jenny, who is grown from Time Lord DNA against the Doctor's will, who is made to be an exceptional soldier, and was a great character that I really wish we had learned more about beyond this story. Her sudden end is exactly that, very sudden. And she was never brought back for the show, which is a huge shame, but similarly to how Eccleston continued his role in the Big Finish audios, Georgia Moffat, now Georgia Tennant, who actually did go on to marry the 10th Doctor himself, David Tennant. They actually met on the set of this episode and married later on. She went on to continue the role in the Big Finish audio. So if you wanted to know more about this character, then that is definitely something I would consider checking out. The Unicorn and the Wasp is themed around Agatha Christie, and this was a fun murder mystery with the Doctor and Donna inviting themselves into the 1920s lifestyle. And with a whodunit style story, the pair seek answers to a series of murders that occur throughout the duration of the episode, and this all builds up to adding a fictitious context to a genuine disappearance of Christie herself, who was confirmed to be missing for approximately 10 days, claiming no memory of what had happened and where she had been. Disc 4 brings us some of the most dark and overall personal favourite episodes, cementing why Series 4 is honestly the best collection of episodes for me personally. And this starts off with Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead, another fascinating story from Moffat, which I would argue is one of his best stories of the entire series, and without us even realising it, it sets up plot threads to answer in his own run of Doctor Who from Series 5 onwards, which I'm sure many fans did appreciate. And so the Doctor and Donna travel to an abandoned library planet where they meet a group of archaeologists led by Professor Riversong and given a vague warning about counting the shadows. This reveals the Vashta Narada, airborne piranhas, described as shadows that will melt the flesh, a villain that cannot be seen, making this all the more psychological and a race for survival. And I really like this concept, and complicating this even more, the overarching plot for this story does a great job at increasing the tension. It turns out that the library is somehow connected to a little girl who is being evaluated by a man named Dr. Moon. And we begin to question what layers of this story really are real and what pertains to more so metaphorical ideas. And there are some genuinely heartbreaking sequences, particularly relating to Donna, who is uploaded as a person, as a digital file. She is uploaded to the library archive with thousands of other people, where she actually meets and marries a man that she genuinely falls for. And in terms of the episodes themselves, they deserve multiple watches for certain. I would also recommend, if you love these episodes, checking out the trivia behind this story, where Moffat intended Dr. Moon to be a future incarnation of the Doctor himself. Some really weird stuff with these episodes, but I cannot fault them. They are some of the most imaginative aspects of Doctor Who. Midnight is an episode I feel has kind of slipped under the radar, where most of this story is set on a small transport, where the Doctor is journeying across the planet Midnight to meet Donna. And supposedly, there's no intelligent life on the surface of this planet, only for an unknown entity to possess one of the passengers. And Leslie Sharp, who plays Sky Silvestri, is a terrifying presence when under the influence of this unknown alien, and I love her performance where the fear factor is based on the unknown using typical horror sound cues such as knocking on the craft. It's a really interesting way to capture your imagination, and I would highly recommend checking out the Doctor Who Confidential episode looking at the behind the scenes of this and how the sound design was really integral to this episode overall, with the way it was structured along with it showing the cramped nature of the set and just how much work went into what arguably looked like a very basic episode of the show when really that wasn't the case. Moving on now to Disc 5, we have the last few episodes of Series 4, starting off with Turn Left, which is a very well written story for the what if angle, answering what if Donna never met the Doctor, and supposedly he dies fighting the Rachnos in The Runaway Bride, and since he's not there to influence Donna, her life takes a completely different turn, illustrated as literally turning right at a junction where the wrong decision impacts the fate of the world. And all of this is thankfully revealed to be a fictitious reality set by a fortune teller, with just a slight bit of truth, all of which revolves around the return of Rose Tyler, the phrase bad wolf, and the end of the universe. What an excellent ending of pure panic from the Doctor, seeing every translatable phrase become bad wolf, taking us into the final 2 episodes of this run. The Stolen Earth and Journey's End is where Series 4 culminates with its best efforts of storytelling, the Infinity War of New Who to simplify, and bringing back the Daleks, an old foe from the classic era being Davros. If it weren't for Dalek Khan, the remaining member of the Cult of Skaro, none of this would have been possible, where Davros is meant to have been saved from the Time War. And so with a race of new Daleks now threatening planet Earth, literally removing it from its place in the universe along with many other planets, Davros has the ultimate weapon to destroy reality itself. And by creating the reality bomb with so many crossovers, these episodes combine the cast of Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures, bringing the Doctor's extended family from across the universe back together. Stakes are high in this story, and you can tell this from the pure portrayal of fear, especially from Sarah Jane and Captain Jack. Just incredible acting from Liz Sladen in particular, and hearing an immortal declare that there is nothing they can do, they're dead, it just adds to the fear factor. And like with most finales, especially for the 10th Doctor, there is an element of tragedy, which is set in motion when the Doctor is shot by a Dalek, where he enters the regeneration mode, but he manages to stall this event by passing all of the energy into his severed hand from the Christmas Invasion episode, and I love how after all this time he still kept the hand. A phrase was hinted at in previous episodes, particularly by the Ood, saying the Dr. Donna, which is made very literal. And this is where the Daleks aim to destroy the TARDIS with Donna trapped inside. Little do they realise the hand is about to sprout a new form of Doctor, where it's combined with some of Donna's DNA, half Time Lord and half human. And although it's silly, I do like the idea of the Meta-Crisis Doctor who is able to save Donna, and without even realizing it, she picked up elements of the Doctor as well, including his mind. And inevitably, this does lead to the defeat of the Daleks, where the Doctor sees Donna now struggling with changes to her mind, and so in one of the saddest scenes of the entire show, he has no choice but to wipe her memory and everything to do with him to allow her to continue living.
Donna, no, I am so sorry. But we had the best of times.
Likewise, when looking at Rose, there are still some aspects of tragedy when looking at her relationship with the Doctor. However, there's an interesting opportunity given to her where the Meta-Crisis Doctor is able to stay in the parallel world with Rose, and basically he is the same as the Doctor. He will age like a human, however, thus fulfilling the foreshadowed romance storyline. And so looking at the Doctor, he does try to save everyone. He still feels like he is lost, however, and that leads us to the next few episodes, which very much feel like they are focused on self-discovery and prophesizing what is yet to come.
You won't believe it, Mr. Smith. But they are creatures from another world. Really? Wow.
Lastly, we have the collection of specials done for David Tennant leading up to his inevitable departure from the show. And you can get a box set containing all of these, however I opted to go for the individual DVD releases. And there's some pretty good episodes included amongst these anyway, and this general period of time for Doctor Who was quite interesting, where certain aspects of the show were up in the air with there being potential for a new companion, or even a new Doctor, and that's where the next Doctor comes into play. And so with 10 now travelling alone, the idea of there being a new Doctor was teased in the form of David Morsey's character, appearing as a man who genuinely believed himself to be the Doctor. And so with 10 travelling to Christmas Eve 1851, he hears someone shouting for the Doctor, where he finds Morsey instead, who knows a lot more than he probably should, and is at first interpreted as a variation of the character. However, sadly, that was never the case. But that would have been a really fun choice for Morsey to actually portray the character as a very diverse actor in his own right. I feel he definitely could have pulled off that very fun but sinister role. Instead, however, with him being a somewhat imposter, the two work together with there being a brief return of the Cybermen, which conveniently some of them escaped the Void Battle from Series 2, where they end up in the 1850s, and so, intent on rebuilding their civilization with their final monstrosity being the Cyber King, the pair are able to fight it together, and the Doctor inevitably defeats it. Overall, it's a fun adventure, it's okay for what it is. The CGI definitely has not aged well at all in my honest opinion, but from when it first aired, I can see it being quite a fun, misguided step for there being a tease of a new Doctor in the form of Morsey, but looking back on it, it's just okay for what it was. Planet of the Dead is overall not a great episode. A lot of this story feels very forced to commit to a certain runtime, and it seems to heavily rely on certain actors portraying roles in this, such as Michelle Ryan and Lee Evans of all people playing a very strange role. It definitely has its moments of excitement, such as where the Doctor is riding a London bus that suddenly travels through a wormhole to a desert-like planet, the problem being that they are stranded and no organic matter can run back through the wormhole, and so ironically, authorities were tracking this bus anyway thanks to a museum thief aboard, Christina, played by Michelle Ryan, who I believe was going to be in the run-up for a possible companion in the future. Sadly, nothing ever really came of that, since I did actually quite like her character. And as far as the character goes, her criminal skills made for some thrilling kind of action scenes. Otherwise, nothing too exciting story-wise, sadly. I did particularly like the alien characters used in this, such as the simplicity of the Tritovores, which gave off a similar charm to the likes of what you'd find practical effect-wise in the 50s Fly movie as an example, but otherwise, I didn't really care for much else in terms of the plot for this. And the CGI flying stingrays were absolutely awful, especially when around this time period, that's when the Doctor Who series switched over to a HD TV format, and so you could definitely tell the difference between what was CG and what was practical. The Waters of Mars is another episode I had absolutely no memory of whatsoever, and oh boy was this an emotional roller coaster to see what becomes of the 10th Doctor in his final episodes approaching the very end of his era, and this is where he takes on the role of the Time Lord Victorious, a title he bestows upon himself incorrectly, where he suddenly embraces the idea of controlling time like an omnipotent being, and witnessing a key point in time, a mission to Mars in 2059 becomes deadly, where a creature hidden within the planet's water starts to zombify human beings. And oh boy, this was very freaky in terms of the creature designs. I absolutely love the aesthetics with the cracks around people's mouths and the empty eyes with water just gushing from their mouths. The Doctor knows the fate of everyone on this mission and even goes as far as telling some of the crew members what's going to happen. It's a set point in the Earth's history where everybody dies, including the mission leader, Adelaide. And this is where the Doctor tries to rewrite history. However, with the awakening that he could possibly control the fate of the universe, this is where he takes on a bigger role, which really does fight back, where the universe has other plans and cannot be controlled. And this leads to a very tragic end scene where the Doctor is actually able to save Adelaide and a couple of the other characters, only for her to commit suicide and preserve the timeline to ensure that her death inspires humanity to go out and travel the stars. And this internal crisis for the Doctor shows just how much weight he is carrying on himself and why having a companion really does balance him out as a person, making this story all the more personal, leading into Tennant's final episodes as the Doctor. The End of Time, I feel, is a story that gets very heavily criticized, but for a finale, I viewed this personally as the ultimate love letter to the Russell T Davies era, with there being so many great callbacks and great attention to detail, and a lot of consideration taken with this being the 10th Doctor's goodbye. Following the foreshadowing given to him from previous specials, this is where the Doctor is given confirmation of a prophecy by the Ood that the Master is not dead and is set to return. And likewise, Wilfred, Donna's grandfather, is made to believe that forces are moving him and the Doctor to meet again one last time and save the world. And so we see a cult of Saxon followers resurrect the Master, and they do this only for the Master's wife to sabotage the ceremony, causing him to be reborn, but incomplete. And this is where he literally starts feeding on the life force of mankind, with some ridiculous CGI where we see his skull phasing through his face, and also the fact that he can now force jump, just some really bizarre ideas. Learning of this, the Doctor obviously wants to put a stop to what the Master is doing and help his nemesis, surprisingly, only to uncover that the Master is being manipulated as part of a scientific experiment held by billionaire Joshua Naismith, where a machine is constructed to heal humanity with the intent of Naismith making his daughter immortal. And when the Master is brought on to essentially code the machine, he instead uses this to change the DNA of every living person, making them into the Master Race. And I remember seeing this for the first time and I couldn't stop laughing. John Sim clearly had a lot of fun in this role, and with the entire planet now converted to having the exact same face of the Master, everybody has changed apart from Wilfred and Donna Noble, who is now starting to remember, and this is an immediate danger, with the Doctor warning that if Donna does remember anything of their adventures, that her mind will burn. Speaking of minds, this episode also provides us with an answer as to why the Master has the constant drumming in his head, and it turns out the Time Lords were responsible, where they manipulated him to try and remove themselves from the time-locked war and re-establish the planet Gallifrey. And this gives the Doctor a very difficult decision where he must choose a side to be on, which inevitably will result in the loss of his life as the 10th Doctor, regenerating into the 11th. And the confrontation by the end, where he is holding a gun to Rassilon, portrayed amazingly by Timothy Dalton, and then switching to point the gun back at the Master. Surprisingly, the Master becomes a somewhat anti-hero, where he exacts his revenge on the Time Lords that made him what he was, and that results in Gallifrey being pushed back into the time-locked war, and that the Doctor has inevitably won, but at a cost of the loss of his life, where he must save Wilfred one last time, and that pushes him into regenerating into the 11th Doctor. Overall, a very promising finale with a lot of emotional complexity and terrific acting, with a great pace of music as well. The soundtrack throughout the entirety of the Davies era has been something that has very much defined a lot of episodes, and it's something that I feel should never go overlooked. It's a beautifully crafted aspect of the show that is very important to the emotional parts of the story. That's going to do it for this deep dive, looking back at the Russell T Davies era of Doctor Who. I hope you enjoyed, and if you made it to the end of this video, I can't thank you enough. I know this has been a very long analysis, but hopefully you got something out of it, and I certainly did enjoy looking back on the show and making this video. But this isn't necessarily the end of the Davies era. Obviously, we have the 60th anniversary specials coming up very soon, but we do have a couple of other Doctor Who related spin-off shows to look at. The first of which is Torchwood, which is a series I've recently started watching. Very much I guess, a young adult kind of interpretation of the Doctor Who universe, with the very fun and charismatic Captain Jack Harkness being the lead role. And beyond that, kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, we have a children's TV series which I grew up with and something that I very much enjoyed when I was a kid, and that is the Sarah Jane Adventures, a series which is very much interconnected, similarly to Torchwood, with the Davies era of Doctor Who. So that'll be very much worth revisiting, in my opinion. And combining both of those shows, perhaps we can make a third part to this look back at the Davies era. Who knows? If you're interested, by all means, drop me a comment down below. Anyhow, if you did enjoy this video, please also leave me a like down below. It's very much appreciated. Comment below, what's your favourite episode from this era of Doctor Who? As always, I love hearing your thoughts and opinions. And for more content, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, DVD Review Studios.
Are you threatening me?